worship together this morning. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaken. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. So I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength, 'cause I build my life on Jesus, and He's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Christ is my firm foundation. He's the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaken. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would He fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Sing this together. Rain came. Oh, rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Rain came, wind blew, my house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Oh, rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Yes, I'm gonna make it through, 'cause I'm standing strong on you. Yes, I'm gonna make it praise this morning. Amen. You can be seated.
Welcome, everyone, to our church, Blue Ridge Bible Church. It is awesome to be together to worship the Lord. I was reading Psalms this morning, how good and pleasant it is for God's people to dwell in His house in unity. Amen. It is so good for the people of the Lord to be united in Christ and to be united in our worship of Christ. We are so thankful also for our country. That's not what unites us. Christ is what unites us, but we are so thankful for God's hand in our country. We're so thankful for those who are our veterans who have served in the military. And yes, so if you've served in military and defending our country and defending our freedoms, we'd love for you to stand and for us to just honor you, take a minute to honor you. So those who have served in any of the armed forces, thank you so much. You all are such a huge blessing to us. And so now I'd like everyone to go ahead and stand and greet those around you and just show appreciation for one another.
myself in you. You are working in our way. You are sanctifying when beyond our understanding. You are teaching us to trust. Your plan is still to prosper. You have not forgotten us. You are with us in the fire and the flood. You're faithful forever, perfect in love. You are sovereign over us.
You are wisdom unimagined. Who could understand your ways? Reigning high above the heavens, reaching down in endless grace. You're the lifter of glory. You're passionate and kind. give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. We lift it up. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth It's your breath in our lungs. We pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. We pour out our praise to you only.
Good morning, church. I'm Brittany. I just want to share a little bit about what's going on in the life of our church. So first, a huge thank you. Anyone who came yesterday out to the church workday, thank you. We are really grateful for your time and your effort in just helping refresh the church, and it looks great. I also want to give a big welcome just to newcomers, whether it's your very first time today or whether you've been here a handful of times. We're grateful that you chose to worship Jesus with us this morning, and there's some great ways to connect after the service. We would love to just meet you at our Next Step station in the lobby. Speaking of new, we have some new covenant members that I'm really excited to get to announce. So I'm going to read their names real quick and then hold your applause and we'll cheer for them together. So Mike and Melanie Gorman and Ann Bittner are now covenant members here. So let's give them a cheer. Yeah, if that's the next step that you are interested in, our next covenant class will be in the new year, in January. So stay tuned and you can talk to someone at the Next Step station to find out about that. Completely changing the topic, Christmas at Blue Ridge. It might seem early, but I say this every year, November is when you prepare for December. So there's two things in particular. We have some Christmas information available on the church website and the church app, and I'm gonna just highlight different parts of that over the coming weeks. But today what I wanna highlight are our two outreaches. In the lobby, we have a local outreach wall and a global outreach wall. And so if you want to participate locally with Tree of Life Ministries, they have a Christmas for Others event, and they need some help with gifts, so you can pick up a gift tag today and then return that one of the next 2 weeks. Similarly, if you want to participate with our Awana program, they have the annual Operation Christmas Child Shoebox outreach. So if you want to pack a shoebox, you can do that, and they're collecting those the next 2 weeks as well. So that's why we're talking about it now. So keep that on your radar, and there's more to come with Christmas. But for now, I actually want to invite up our deacon for Global Outreach, Mark Benedict, and he's going to share with us.
Thanks, Brittany. Well, good morning. Well, I was not surprised, but it is a very interesting thing that the most unreached nation in the world is not Nigeria, it's not Iran or Iraq or some third world nation in Africa, it's Japan. Only less than 1% of the 266 million people in Japan consider themselves Christians. It is clearly the second most unreached nation in the world. Well, I got some good news though. Your church is supporting a new missionary that just arrived in Asumi, Japan this month. His name is Stephen Clemens. And Stephen is one of our youngest missionaries at 26 years old. We're not holding that against him, seeing that the average age in our missions committee is about 80 or 90. But we know that Stephen will ripen well. In the coming months, he's going to start his language classes in Japanese. He's also going to be teaching at a local church, and he will be leading youth group services. So he's beginning his ministry, and we look forward to partnering with him. Now, we're very fortunate in that Stephen's going to give you his own introduction in a short video, and then I'll come back and give us our congregation prayer.
Hello, my name is Stephen Clemens. I'm a missionary with the Association of Baptists for World Evangelism, and I want to share with you my story of how God has placed in me a love for the Japanese people and a desire to see revival reach the nation of Japan. Japan is an island nation with over 125 million people. Of these millions, less than 1% are Christians. And so my story actually starts in Japan. You see, my family and I moved to Okinawa, Japan because my dad was in the military. And while we were living there, we of course picked up some of the culture and the language, and we learned quite a bit. We also did something pretty awesome. we were able to adopt a Japanese boy. And so Christopher Show is now a part of the Clemens family. Getting to know this new Japanese member of our family, it kind of felt to me like I had to share my brother with this other people group and culture and identity. And naturally, I just grew in a desire to know more about who the Japanese people were, what is it that they loved, and how is it that they saw the world. Something else happened just before we moved back to the US, however, and in March of 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake shook the island of Honshu, Japan.
Meters north of Tokyo to the massive earthquake that struck the north of Japan.
Earthquake has struck off the northeast coast of Japan and been felt in the capital Tokyo.
As we were moving back to the US, it seemed like we were flying away from catastrophe and just utter calamity. And there was a part of me that was relieved, not because I was impacted at all or the place I was living was impacted, but because Japan was a very spiritually dark place. And even at a young age, I was able to experience a lot of that spiritual darkness, and I felt more afraid and alone at times while I was living there than I had ever felt before. There were a lot of things that I looked back on in Japan and I missed. But at the end of the day, there was no desire in me whatsoever to ever return to Japan. That is until I was scrolling through the channels on the TV and I just happened upon the Women's World Cup final.
They have rewritten the history books in Germany. The first Asian champions. Their first attempt in a final. They were behind twice.
I remember at the end of the match just being in tears, rooting for Japan, because I knew that this was a people who, amid so much pain and hurt, they never gave up. Who are these people who are able to live so selflessly despite not knowing the love of God? You see, there's a lot of other nations in the world that I could be a missionary to. There's a lot of countries that desperately need to know the good news of Jesus Christ. Japan is the second most unreached people group in the world, and the Lord has given me a very specific love and calling to go serve in that place. So I'm asking others to come and partner with me and join in the work that I'm going to do. Jesus says, "My peace I give to you. As the Father is sending me, so I am sending you." And this is a command that Jesus has given to the whole church, to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So if this is something that you would be interested in doing, and you would like to partner with me in the work that ABWE is doing in Japan, please financially give in the links below and take part in interceding in prayer for the people of Japan. May God bless you.
Stephen represents the next generation of missionaries that our church is sponsoring and supporting. Over the past several years, we have been going through a transition where many of our older ministries are retiring or taking on different challenges. And so we look forward to working with Stephen and also some other new ministries that have come on within the past months and years. Now, as we prepare for our congregation prayer, I'd like to just briefly put us in the frame of mind of David when he was being hunted by Saul in the wilderness for 13 years is what some people speculate. And through that, he makes a statement, and it's in Psalms 63:1. And he says, "O God, you are my God, earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for your body, longs for you, in a dry and weary land where there is no water." What David knew was that our only satisfaction comes from God in this world, but also from in eternity, and that the greatest gift that we have is that God has given himself to us. Let us pray. Dear Lord, first I'd like to raise our veterans and our military folks to you, Lord, for the sacrifices that they've made for us, and that you will bless them, that you will give them grace in their lives, Lord, and that you'll allow them to be your servants. I'd also like to raise up the Gossage family and Caitlin for your peace and grace as they continue to deal with the pain of loss of losing Jansen. Let us, Lord, remember them in our prayers and for their loss, but also to be sensitive to them and to show them love and compassion as we go forward. I'd also like to lift up Ray Ryan and her family during their current health problems. And again, may your power bring swift and full healing, Lord, for their needs and for the health concerns that confront them. And finally, I'd like to ask that you be with our missionary Stephen Clemens in Japan as he begins his language classes and starts to work with the youth. Encourage and preserve him going forward, Lord. It's even though it's a modern world or a modern country, it is a dark place in so many ways, and there'll be no doubt times that he will need to lean heavily upon you. And we ask that you preserve him in this new challenge that he has before him. Thank you for hearing our petitions. We praise your name, and we ask that you will be with us going forward this week. Amen.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. At this time, the children that are participating in Ridge Kids can make their way to the back. Miss Gina is ready to receive them, and the rest of you can take out your Bibles and join me in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians 10. You know, it wasn't that long ago that Karen and I found ourselves in a move and having to rent a vehicle. And in doing so, I learned something about these U-Haul trucks. And that is, I don't think they trust me with the speed of which I'm going to drive their trucks. I discovered on those engines, they put what's called a governor. And if you're not familiar with a governor, here's sort of an antiquated version of it up on the screen. But you can kind of see it, this is the older style, where you've got these little flywheels. And when the speed hits a certain speed, the flywheels are moving outwards. Once they've hit that speed, they're rigged in such a way that it's going to begin to cut off the fuel that goes to your engine, and thus you can't go any faster. I learned in those trucks 59 miles an hour, which was quite painful on a longer drive. But the whole idea is we've got to limit your speed, Jack. You don't quite always know what you're doing when you've got that much mass moving that fast down an interstate and around other people. Well, what I can describe here for a truck, for myself and with U-Haul, in a similar way, we discover that 1 Corinthians chapters 8, 9, and 10 are kind of operating on the same platform. It's the idea behind it is that God is saying, listen, there are freedoms that you have as a Christian and as a believer. But before you just go exercising them to the full hilt, you might need a little bit of a governor on you, some means to control your speed such that you don't go willy-nilly and pell-mell and wind up hurting other people through the exercise of some of your liberties. And the call is you need to consider other people as you exercise some of these liberties. And you got to consider your testimony to them. In some cases, it might be with Christians, and in some cases, it might even be with non-Christians. But we're wise to stop and think about others. And at the end of the day, the governor that's going to guard our hearts is going to be the Holy Spirit through his word, but through a love that God gives us for the people that we're around. Love will be our governor. In the days of the Corinthians, that specific freedom was in being able to eat a particular meat, or in some cases not being able to eat a particular meat. And it was the meat that had been leftovers as part of the sacrifice that had been given to idols. And some who had come out of idolatry could not eat that meat. It took them back into this form of worship, and they're like, we can't go there. We can't embrace that. We can't be a part of that. And yet you had other people in the same congregation who were like, no big deal. If I never worship the idols and the meat is just the meat and who cares? I can eat that meat and it's no harm, no foul. And so how are we going to get along as a church when some people can do something that other people cannot? Now, I don't know about you, but as long as I've been in ministry, I've never once encountered this specific issue of Christians arguing over whether or not they could eat meat that had been sacrificed to idols. After studying this, I'm loaded for bear if I ever do encounter them. While this doesn't actually specifically play out in our day and in our time, one of the things I've hoped you've seen as the weeks have gone out on how this actually in principle does apply to so many different things in our lives. And I've covered several of them before. You take something like trick-or-treating. Some people can trick-or-treat, or at least give candy out at trick-or-treating. Others, they can't have anything to do with it. Some can read Harry Potter. Some people, they can't have anything to do with it. Back in 2020, vaccines sort of came on the scene for us, didn't it? And for some people, getting those vaccines, they cannot do it. And for others, no problem. They most certainly could. Alcohol. Some people can drink it, and they're fine as long as they don't abuse it. Other people, they can't even go there. They can't put it to their lips. And we can go down a whole bunch of other avenues. You've got things like the educational choices for your children. Some people, it'll be public school, and they can do it, and others can't. Others will be private school. They can do it, and others can't, usually due to funding, money. Homeschooling. Some can do it. Some are called to it. Some are not. But we also saw how Paul went one step further, and he actually did prohibit one thing for people. And he says, you don't have the freedom to eat meat in the temple that it's being offered to the idol and participating in that service and in that worship. That was a prohibition. Don't do that. Eating meat was one thing, but participating in worship, now it was entering into a different realm altogether. And we discussed some of those things about how probably the closest parallel we've got to that today is an invitation to a homosexual wedding. And how you might, Christians are arguing about this. Can you go to it or can you not? And it seems very closely aligned with exactly what Paul was talking about here. That you're endorsing, you're embracing something, a form of worship that the Bible clearly does not endorse. And so there's aspects to this that work their way out into our lives more and more so in the day-to-day. Or maybe you're called through your work to engage in some form of an alternative religion or fundraiser for the purposes of endorsing it. So what do you do in those circumstances? So again, we've seen that while this matter of meat might not specifically apply to us, the principle of freedoms, and in some cases being willing to surrender your own freedoms for the sake of others, it's very applicable for us today. And our passage today that we're looking at is going to close the matter on this. So if you would stand with me while I begin reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 23, and I'm going to read all the way to 11, verse 1. 10:23, all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. Let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. Eat anything that's sold in the meat market without asking questions for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's and all it contains. If one of the unbelievers invites you and you want to go, eat anything that's set before you without asking questions for conscience sake. But if anyone says to you, this meat is sacrificed to idols, do not eat it, for the sake of the one who informed you and for conscience sake. I mean, not your own conscience, but the other man's. For why is my freedom judged by another's conscience? If I partake with thankfulness, why am I slandered concerning that for which I give thanks? Whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Give no offense, either to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of the many, that they may be saved. Be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ. Our Father in heaven, this is a text that because it's your word, we know it applies to you, but quite often it can be confusing for us. So I pray that you would grant us clarity and understanding, but not so that we can walk out of here and be able to explain something or understand something better. Rather, that we can live this out for your name's sake and for your glory. Would you grant us that? In Jesus' name, amen. Please be seated. I've told you all before about sort of a tool that a lot of Jewish writers use, but for the sake of those of you that have never heard of it, that tool is called a chiasm, or some people will refer to it as a chiasm. And the point behind a chiasm is it's going to make a first point and a last point that are either exactly the same or sometimes they're contrasting. Then it'll make a second point and a second to last point that'll also be that way, and a third point and a third to last point until you get to the central theme. And it's sort of a tool to say, here's what's most important about this, but I want you to see and understand things as we go into it and as we back out of it. And so you come up with a name from it, from chi, the Greek letter, which looks like an X. And if you kind of think of it as taking half of the letter X here, thus you have a chiasm. One of my seminary professors, his name was Dr. Tom Constable, and he went through this text with us. And he said, I firmly believe that this presents a strong chiasm here. And the more I've looked at it, the more I've studied, the more I think, I think he's on to something here. I disagree with him on just a little bit, but I'm still going to borrow his outline for the sake of today's lesson. And so the chiasm looks like this. First, you're going to deal with this criteria having to do with surrendering your liberties. And the call is, you will surrender liberties when you find that it's going to be good for other people. And at the very end of the argument, he does the same thing. He explains the criteria, but he gets more specific, that people would become Christians, that all would be saved. The second point and the second to last point have to do with personal freedoms explained, and then finally personal freedoms defended. But then you come to the center point of his argument, and this is what's really key and important in this, and it's the criterion illustrated, that when it comes to our liberties, what's going to govern us? Ultimately, God's going to do it through our love for others. So again, let's break it down, starting with the effort to consider what is the criteria for surrendering your liberties. And he answers it. It's seeking the good of others. Notice what he says in verse 23. All things are lawful. Now, if you were here when we went through chapter 6, Paul has used this phrase before. He did back then. And if you'll also remember, one of the things we highlighted about this is, in some ways, this is a phrase that the Corinthians obviously are using. Their cry, all things are lawful to me. We're under Christ. We are not under the law anymore. So that would be a true statement. The problem was they were using the statement, but in an inappropriate way. And so they're getting lax with what God wants from them. So when they say all things are lawful in this verse, I would encourage you, if you have a paper Bible, take some quotation marks and put it around that. So the next time you read it, you remember, okay, this is what the Corinthians are arguing. This is what they're saying. And they needed a qualifier. All things are lawful. In Christ, I'm not under that law. But at the same time, you have to realize that while I'm not under the law, that doesn't invalidate law. And I'll give you an example to make my point. If someone were to come to you and say, I'm no longer under the law, great. Therefore, I can steal anytime I want. Do you have a problem with that? Of course you do. Of course you do. Because that defies the essence of what are we talking about here? And the idea behind law here is just my standing before God has been fulfilled completely in Christ. Jesus fulfilled the law. I'm not under the obligations of the law to earn a righteousness for God. That's what the Christian faith holds to. So when we're looking at this here, that does not mean, though, that we just go and enter into lawlessness and throw all that out. There are still things that we will do because they align with who God is, who Christ is, and how I'm to live my life. Well, in chapter 10, Paul is addressing some things, and it's not necessarily things that are moral matters. He's addressing areas that we will say are areas of liberty. They're not necessarily right and wrong, but they wind up being more left and right. And he says that while some things people might be free to do, he goes on to say, but not all things are beneficial. Now break this down to microcosm. Someone might come and say, as a Christian, I am free to smoke a cigarette. I'm not in violation of the law. But we might look at that and go, well, you might be free to smoke a cigarette, but is that beneficial? We know it causes cancer. We know it's going to give you issues. We know it's going to cause problems. Is that really beneficial? And what does it do for the people around you? So there's aspects here you've got to stop and think, wait a minute, what's helpful? Are you free to enter into some multi-level marketing scheme as a Christian? Well, as long as it's not immoral, absolutely you are. Is it beneficial if you start doing that in church? And before long, people start to avoid you because they don't see you as loving them. What they see is you're a source of income for them. So there's times where you've got a freedom in an area, and it's not right or wrong, but we're going to have to stop and ask ourselves, is it beneficial? And that's what Paul is addressing here. And so his point, you're not free to use your liberties if it winds up hurting others unnecessarily. We're already at the big idea behind this text. The Christian life is not ultimately about you getting to exercise your liberties. It's about bringing glory to God as you consider helping others' spiritual progress. That's why he says all things are lawful, but not all things edify. Edification is a higher priority than the exercise of your liberties. Did you hear that? Edification is higher than the exercise of your liberties. And I'll give you a great example of what we're talking about here. Let's go back a few years into COVID. There was a time and a place in which masks were no longer mandated. And so as a result, that you would go around some people, some would wear masks, and some would not. And we had an incident in particular, which an individual was very uncomfortable about being around people who didn't have masks because they had an illness. And as a result of their illness, they were having to go through treatments. As a result of going through treatments, their immune system had just been clobbered. So as a result, one of the things I found is that anytime I went around this individual, I kept a mask in my back pocket. And that way, if I encountered them, I would just put it on. I wouldn't wait for them to have to say, would you please put on a mask? I already knew where they were. This was a matter as her like, I don't need to exercise my liberty of going maskless. This is a time where we've got to consider the other person. And that's what Paul is addressing. What benefits the other person? Verse 24, he says, let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. Again, God is saying that while he gives us liberties, we should voluntarily place a higher priority on edifying other people in their faith and on their journey towards faith. So if I can take all these words right here and I can condense them down to something a little bit simpler and easier to remember, it would be this. It's not about you. Your liberties, they're there for you to enjoy, and they're there for you to use, but it's not about you. Never think the focus is you. You are here for Christ. The goal is not that others orbit around you. You're orbiting around Christ. And because of that, you're trying to pull people into that orbit and have an experience and to know him. That should be what we're to do. In fact, the highest call regarding your liberties might be to exercise the freedom to consider others before you consider yourself. Isn't that something? That God would give you the freedom to do that. Consider others before you consider yourself. Now, some might argue, well, what about all these people come around, they make demands, and they're ugly, and they're saying you should do this, and you have to do this, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know that this is necessarily addressing that you always have to surrender to the person who's got the loudest voice. But you know what? There might be times as an individual where you might actually do that for their sake, so that you don't unnecessarily present something that would inhibit them from knowing Jesus. And there's not a list of rules of if A then B, if C then D. God is going to work on your heart in those moments with those individuals. And so you're not going to get a checklist or an algorithm as to know when to do it. You're going to have to walk with God, and you're going to have to talk with God, and you're going to have to trust him in those moments. Verse 25 is the explanation about personal freedoms. And so we're getting back to the specific issue regarding this eating of meat to idols. Now remember, Paul said, you can eat any meat you want. Even if it was offered in the temple as a sacrifice, his only prohibition was don't eat it while in the temple during the worship. Because worship that now is different than just freedom in eating meat. And here he says, eat anything that is sold in the market without asking questions for conscience sake. Now remember, back in this day, Jews would often be very concerned about their diets because they were under the law. And so they had to say, is this kosher for us to eat? Is this something that we can have? And Paul is letting the Christian know, you're not under kosher laws. You got that food? Eat it, enjoy it. And you're not participating in idol worship just because you ate some of that meat and you chose not to dig into the history of the meat and where it came from and where it was sourced and who handled it and so forth. It's just, here it is, you can enjoy it. In fact, in verse 26, it's an Old Testament quote of Psalm 24. For the earth is the Lord's and all it contains. And he's letting them know, look, everything that God created and owns is on the same level. So you don't have to go making these religious distinctions about these things, all right, between the types of food or where it's been. Now, when it comes to meat, you may want to know what the expiration date is on it, but that's an entirely different matter. This has to do with the history and where's it been, and did it touch an idol in some way, shape, or form? Paul says, don't even worry about it. Verse 27, he moves to the practical application in his day. If one of the unbelievers invites you and you want to go, eat anything set before you without asking question for conscience sake. Now, obviously, he just got finished recently in the passage telling people, now, don't eat this in the temple during the worship service. So he's not advocating that. He's mentioning that someone invites you over to their house. Someone's inviting you out to the equivalent of a restaurant in their day. Hey, you want to go? My treat. I'll take you to Monk's. I'll take you to wherever. And so people are going, okay, yeah, that's great. And he's making the point, you don't have to go asking about all the history of the meat and where it's been. Verse 28, though, this is when he hits us with a contrast. But if anyone says to you, this meat is sacrificed to idols, do not eat it, for the sake of the one who informed you, and for conscience sake. And I mean not your own conscience, but for the other man's. So now what's he doing? He's illustrating the criterion regarding when you willingly surrender your liberties and why you willingly surrender them. It's because you love the person. And you don't want to throw in front of them an unnecessary hurdle to their faith in knowing Jesus. That's the idea. Now, in that day, there was a lot of Christians got confused with Jews. Diet, again, was a big deal to the Jew. So the Christians sort of got the same assumptions made about them regarding the food that they had and that they would eat. So a host might make the gesture to know, oh, by the way, while I'm giving you this meat, you need to know, we got it over here from the temple of Zeus or Apollos, and, brought that here. And Paul's point is, if he's mentioning it to you, you need to make an assumption. It matters to him. This is an issue to him for some reason. Now, some people have asked, well, is this person just trying to throw a test out to you to see what you're doing? Maybe, I doubt it. Is the person just trying to be helpful and telling you the history and be respectful? Maybe, possibly. Are they taunting the person? I kind of doubt it if they're inviting them out to eat, but you never know. But the point and the reason Paul says hold off on these liberties is this non-Christian clearly has an issue with it because they brought it up. And so Paul's take, just say, you know what? I didn't even feel like eating meat tonight anyway. And forego your liberties and just pass it up. Remove the hindrance and remove the hiccups altogether. Because you love him. And you don't want this person presented with any hindrances to knowing Jesus. It's not worth it. Let it go. The latter part of verse 29 is where Paul answers the question now that we're all asking. And this is where I'm actually going to alter a little bit with Dr. Constable's outline to say that it isn't personal freedoms defended, but rather that it's explained again. And that's the latter part of verse 29. Why is my freedom judged by another's conscience? If I partake with thankfulness, why am I slandered concerning that for which I give thanks? So, what is this text doing? It's summarizing by saying this: why should another man's limitations determine my liberties? That's what you're all asking when you read this. Why do I have to give way to them? And the reason, again, if my liberties are going to cause them a problem with seeing Jesus accurately, then I should be willing to give them up. And this is where I'll go one step further. What if they're ugly about it? Because to be very candid, that's when I want to bow up to them. I think according to this text, look at the individual, look at Christ, and ask Jesus, what do you want me to do for this individual? How can I help them? And I do know of instances, and I'll go back to sort of the COVID issues that we had of people that may have screamed about put your mask on, and those that defied them or argued with them generally didn't get an opportunity to share the gospel later with them. But those who said, hang on, let me just go ahead and put this on. Now there was this deeper consideration that I'm going to hear from you. I'll listen to you. And now maybe I've earned a little bit more of a right that you will listen to me when I can share with you something far more important than what you get in this life, and that is eternal life with Christ. So again, the criteria is explained again in verse 31, that all may be saved. Whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. Live for that which is higher than you, and that's Christ. God is glorified when you act like him. And how did he act when it came to you? Jesus surrendered everything. He gave up heaven to walk on this earth of pain and heartache and strife and difficulty. He gave up his righteousness in exchange for your sin. This is what the cross is all about. He surrendered his rights so that you could find salvation and find a spiritual well-being. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what glorifies God. When we mimic, when we operate in accordance with the gospel. And that's what we get the opportunity to do in these instances. Verse 32, give no offense either to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God. Don't place an unnecessary hurdle or obstacle that would hinder faith. Now, this is one where we all kind of struggle with a little bit here too, right? Because maybe the next question then comes down to, well, then do we just lie to people in order to make them happy? Do we just become spiritual chameleons so that we don't give any offense at all? No, that's not necessarily the case. In fact, I'll go down this whole current issue regarding what do we do with pronouns? Do we just lie to people and use a different pronoun? And I would say, I think this is going to hurt the gospel, especially if they become a Christian through the process or become sanctified through the process. Because if we lied to them to give them the gospel, we kind of undid the truth. You've got to be able to speak the truth to them. And if that is offensive, that's a little different. Now, there's tact in how we do this, and there's kindness in how we do this. But you don't want to be lying to people as a means of being able to obtain a voice to them. You will never earn that. But when it comes to the non-moral matters of life, what do? Then you flex. Be willing to surrender to others. And we got a great example of this that Paul did in the New Testament. Some of you might recall in Acts chapter 16, he's got his disciple, Titus, coming alongside him. And Titus was born of a Jewish mom, but a Greek dad, so he's a Greek. And Titus wasn't circumcised like Jewish boys were. He was a Greek. So as a result, Paul puts Timothy in this situation in which he's going to be ministering to Jews. And Paul knows something. Circumcision doesn't do anything for your salvation, Timothy. But here's what we're going to do. Let's circumcise you so that you will have a voice to the Jews. And what does Timothy say? Oh, all right. He says, you sure, Paul? There's not another way we can do this. But Paul says, no. This is a liberty we're going to forego so that they might be saved. But then you get down to Galatians chapter 2. And now Paul has another guy that he's discipling, and his name is Titus. And he makes the point in speaking about Titus that Titus is a Greek, and he's dealing with Greeks. And he made it a purposeful defense to say, there is no way Titus should be circumcised. Why? Because it's a liberty that he has. It's not a requirement of God. And on top of that, it's not even going to help his witness. So you don't do that. And then people look at that and they go, well, isn't Paul being inconsistent? What we would say is, Paul is applying what we're looking at right here. Do you circumcise or not? In this situation, yeah, forego the liberty and get that done. In this situation, no. In fact, quite the opposite. Stand firm on this and don't go down that route. In verse 33, Paul speaks of his own example. He says, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of the many, so that they may be saved. So again, will the exercise of this non-moral activity profit others, help them to know God or to grow in Christ? I should be thinking about others and not just myself, and not bring any unnecessary offense. So my question, what liberties do you have that you can and sometimes do use such that a weaker Christian or unbeliever might find an unnecessary hindrance to the gospel. We've talked about a few already, but at the end of the day, God's going to reveal them to you as you encounter others. And once again, if the person's issues are regarding sin, well, now that we don't waver on. If they're offended against that, it's an offense against the mandate and the call of God. But when it comes to these other things that aren't as critical, maybe you need to think about letting it go. If it's the gray areas of Christian liberty, freedoms that are not moral, but might help or hurt the gospel, if it isn't governed in accordance with the situation, that, ladies and gentlemen, is when you need to think about surrendering for the sakes of others. How do I close all these 3 chapters up? I just want to leave you with an image to carry with you this week. Hopefully it's an aid to help you in this when you encounter it. I think you and I, in many ways, are like this image up here. We are like the Hoover Dam. This thing has potential, massive energy. Through it, there's electricity that's provided to California, Nevada, and Arizona. So many different things. It's concentrated power, but it's a concentrated power that is under control. And if you were to ever just let this thing go loose, it would cause an unbelievable amount of carnage and damage to the very people that it's meant to serve. It has to be governed. It has to be limited so that immense power can make a difference in the lives of the people that it's meant to serve. And you and I are just like that. We have the immense power of the gospel in us, on us, and meant to go through us. So what's the call? Let it flow through you and to aid others. But be ready to govern some of the liberties that you have to aid the people that are downstream of you in your life. Let us never overwhelm them unnecessarily. Would you stand with me? Our Father in heaven, you've got all of us in different places throughout this county and beyond this county, through workplaces. Constantly, our lives will come into contact with others. And so, Father, our prayer is that when we are around Christians, let us be sensitive. Let us be ready. Let us know when to challenge and to provoke one another. Let us know and help us in guiding us as to when we are just to maybe let something go entirely for their sake. And for the non-Christians and the unbelievers, Lord, you've not called us to be doormats, but you have called us to be a people that are willing to surrender what is not necessary for them to know you. And we just all confess we have a flesh and we struggle with this. I will confess often I just want to win. And your call to me is to enable them to be one to you. So would you help us as we seek your wisdom in this? And Lord, I pray too for anyone listening online, maybe visiting this morning. And this whole idea of what you surrendered is an eye-opener to them because they've never embraced or known just how much you gave for us in calling us to be your own. And I pray that you would enable them to see who you are and to believe and to trust in the salvation that Christ alone can offer in giving us his righteousness and taking our sin. Would you do that in lives and hearts today? And Lord, I pray for this congregation that you give us opportunities to speak the same message to other people and open their hearts as well. And it's in Jesus' name we ask it and we pray. Amen. And while this completes the service, nobody here is going to be dismissed. Everyone will be sent. Let the Lord govern your liberties in love, my friends. Have a wonderful day.